Nice. That's a pretty good tree. And thank God they taught me how to cut and stick things in school. With this beautiful creation done, let's talk about what we're actually going to do this week. To be totally honest, the main thing I'm thinking of is just the end-to-end again. So we've kind of gone through this loop. I'm keeping track of what I would call buckets in terms of buckets of gameplay categories, which at the moment are world gen, story and progression, discoverables, which is largely just content, generally more stuff, nice, combat, and technical stuff. So I'm kind of going to do these things on a loop except for technical, because we're not doing technical, are we? Oh, speaking of which, there she blows. So I think I'm going to go back to focusing on story for a little while, because I've focused on discoverables and world gen for like the past few weeks. So actually that's quite exciting, because that's one of the main gameplay things. Mainly it's the hub world I'm going to focus on. So the main thing I'm thinking of is having a sort of mechanic where essentially you can bet how many rounds of world gen you expect to be able to survive for. With these sort of roguelite games, what they do is make it so that you have to do a certain number of things, and if you were to die then you'd lose all your progression on that. I'm thinking I'm going to build a system where like a lot of the best items or the best world gen will be towards the sort of tail end of the number of explorations that you have to do. So this is kind of one of the fundamentals of the gameplay loop, like you're not expected to be able to do just one world at a time. Ideally you'd be doing multiple. So right now the hub world looks like this. It turns out that this character is now walking around as a result of the work I did the other week. I had no idea that that was going to happen. Honestly, a big part of this is just going to be see how it goes. Like, I've planned a lot of this stuff out down here, so let's just see what happens. Okay, so this is the screen I've got so far. It's pretty simple, don't look too closely at it. So the way it works is you just say I want to do this many explorations in a row and it goes up gradually. All this logic is just here, so you can change it however you want. And the other thing that works is that if you use your keyboard to navigate stuff, then that all works as you'd expect. Because of course for controller support, you need that stuff. There he is, here's the guy. Come here, come here, come here. Stop walking around. Oh, stop walking around. Hey! Nice. Where's the guy gone? He hasn't gone in there, has he? Ugh. You can see him walking around. Bloody hell. That's not in the spirit of Christmas, mate. Unfortunately, it doesn't really look like what I'd expect on some devices. So what I've managed to get is that if you sign up to one of these bets, say the sword one, you get this little pop-up in the top that will tell you how many is left. And this is all entirely implemented in GameCore as well. It has nothing to do with the open source base, which is nice because this is kind of like game specific stuff at this point. If I end it there, and I go back to the void, you can see I've now got 4 remaining. So if I keep doing that, then eventually it will run down to 0 and I'll get my reward. I just haven't added the code yet that gives you the reward. So if I was then to go in here and set my health to 0, so you can see that the window at the top is now gone. So this is kind of how I'm doing like the roguelike element, because if you were to die then you were to lose out on the route. And I'm thinking that taking on part of the bet is going to be one of the main ways of how the story plays out. Not something like getting 1 apple for doing 100 gameplay sessions. I'm filming this because I'm just having a bit of a total mental breakdown about what to do next. Because, okay, so I'm sort of in 2 minds. Actually, there's this really great video by this person about how the dialogue system in Hades actually works. And I'm looking at that and thinking, you know, realistically I probably need a similar thing, but the problem is that's going to take a long time, and I'm thinking I'm going to have to stop feature creeping this game. It's so different from what it used to be. Now, as much as I think I could have a good dialogue system, I think I'm also going to have to get down to the economics of like, at what point do I just draw the line in the sand and say it'll be there but it won't be incredible. The devs from Hades spent a lot of time trying to make sure that you didn't see any line of dialogue twice. And to be totally honest, like, I'm not really sure that I have the feature capacity to be able to do that in this game, because I'm one man and I'm also a part-time YouTuber. Part of the thought process was that if the player discovers, say, the cherry blossom biome or the desert, then they would then, as a result, get a bit of dialogue from someone who hung out in the void world. And, you know, that would give a bit of context for the world and the lore and that sort of thing. One of the goals of the game was to have lots. So I guess the question is, do I have lots of dialogue or do I have lots of items or collectibles? Because then if the items and collectibles grow, then the rate at which the dialogue system is going to start to fall over will increase with it. Maybe the best thing to do is just make a really bad implementation of it and then update it as I go. Right. Today's been a mess. I realised that I was going to have the ability to save the quest state to the save file in order to actually test a lot of this gameplay stuff. So I spent a lot of the evening just fixing issues with the serialization system. So I added a new save file version, and I also added this ability to do an any object type for the schema check. Because of course, if we remember what the schema check is, this is just to check that the JSON actually makes sense. For the case of quest, which is this is the quest, this bit here, I didn't necessarily know what was going to be here, so there's no point schema checking it. It just went on and on. Like, I was finding bugs just everywhere. So just to give you an example of what one of the issues was, this is the register parser function, which ultimately gets called by this down here. This just gets passed to parser object. So the way it used to work, because it would do parsers.append, parser, constructor. What it used to look like was just constructor and then straight into this code. So what you actually got was this prev parser was called here before append had actually been called, which meant that the parsers wasn't in the parsers list. So when you went to call get previous parser, which is how you just do stuff, it was actually coming back and just giving me the wrong parser, which then meant it failed the schema check, which then meant everything blew up. And I had to trace through the whole code base to figure out why it was doing that. And it's currently 10 past 2 in the morning. This is kind of the difficult bit I've got to get through, but everything just takes longer than I think it will. And this is in one of the bits of the code that's tested the best. I mean, look at all the tests I've got in here. Look at all of them. There's loads of them. And they didn't catch that issue because this is how I'm establishing the list, and then I pass it off to the checks. So it already had a fully established list before I went to check it off. So here I was testing this thing and it worked fine. But then when I went to open the actual game up, it didn't work fine. I've just sort of been chipping away at this all day. So the main change is that you can now save your bet count thing in the save file, which is quite interesting. But I did a lot of other stuff to get that to work. So I'm just using my quest system to write a bunch of flags, which aren't really that readable when you look at it in Vim. It's kind of like progress is being made, but what I thought was going to be like really kind of invigorating to get some story in place for the first time was just a bit like, okay, whatever. I'm calling it the bet system right now, but I've got no real idea what it's going to be called in the final game or how it's going to work, or I'm really just trying stuff out to see what sort of works. So this is my attempt to make my roguelike game actually a roguelike game. Come to think of it, I think this is actually going to be Devlog 50. I should have thought of something more interesting to do for this week. Who knows? This might be a central pillar of the gameplay. Or it might not. So I'm going to park that up for now and then play test at some other point. But more likely I'm going to go to bed because it's late. Right. I ended up having to spend quite a while fixing a bug that was in relation to... Basically, I couldn't play the game on the Steam Deck because it kept crashing every time I tried to replay the game. Now the reason for that, it turns out after quite a bit of searching, for a few hours. You know that bit where I spawn a bee when the beehive is destroyed? So the problem was that when the world shuts itself down, if there's a beehive in the world at any point, it will destroy all entities. And then here when the entity is destroyed, it will also spawn a bee, which then will be added to the list and have like a billboard and everything. But the entity manager will assume it's destroyed all the entities, and long and short, that crashes everything. All in all, that is still quite successful. So I've just been kind of messing around with the enemy health bar billboard thing. Some health bars will change in size depending on how much health the enemy actually has. So if we were to have a look at Beehive, see the bees have less health compared to the hive itself. It kind of allows the player to read into what sort of damage different enemies would do depending on which enemy they are, right? So you can see that the beehive will be quite a bit of work to destroy just based on what the health bar is doing, but the bees themselves probably won't be too difficult. But I'd like to do quite a bit of other work to the health bars because realistically there's quite a few things that could change. And maybe it would be nice to have a little bit of an animation of this is how much damage you've done and then it goes down. I think that would definitely be useful for the player. Yeah, I mean, I like that sort of change. Surprisingly enough, there was me thinking it was just going to be a GUI thing, but actually, this is really helpful for gameplay. Here's my latest improvements to the health bar. The main thing that I've done is if I spawn a beehive, you see how it's got a different coloured health bar? So the idea for this is that previously, if I just made it bigger, it would have taken up more space on the screen. And I don't want that because I would feel intimidated by longer than average lengthwise objects. So what I've instead done is done this sort of thing where it has a category of which like health section it's in. As I go over here and start taking health away from the beehive, it just goes back to regular colour. So this kind of helps communicate a bit better what's actually going on with the beehive. Okay, we're getting very close to 1,000 commits. I need to start getting on with the next week's batch of work. Unfortunately, I do think the betting system still needs a bit of work, but we've got another week to do that. I'd probably say 6 out of 10 for game dev this week, 4 out of 10 for technical work instead, 10 out of 10 for Christmas cheer, obviously. Christmas!